What's going on, guys? Wei Koh here from Revolution, here to talk about a really cool watch that's been launched by Vacheron Constantin. So, as you guys know, Vacheron Constantin's Overseas is one of my favorite watches. The relaunch for the watch happened in 2016, and there were two incredible models that were made for that relaunch. The first is the Vacheron Constantin Overseas Ultra Thin, using the famous caliber 1121, which was the original caliber that was in the 222 back in 1977 when that watch was launched. The other version of that is, of course, one of my favorite watches of all time, which is the Vacheron Constantin Overseas Perpetual Calendar, which features the caliber 1120 in the skeleton format. I believe it's called 1120 QPSQ, and in the non-skeleton format, it's 1120 QP. But then 2 years later, in 2018, they came up with another cool version of that watch, and that was the dual time watch. And in 2019, they made probably the most mind-blowingly cool version of that watch that we'd ever seen. So in 2018, it was launched in the steel model, and in 2019, it was created as a one-off prototype with a case made of titanium, with a bezel reinforcement made of tantalum, and with crown guards made of tantalum. And this watch was worn by a really cool guy named Cory Richards. So who's Cory Richards? Well, he's a mountaineer, he's a photographer, and he's an all-around wild man. And he's a guy that actually ascended Everest 2 times already by 2016, and in 2016, he did it without oxygen. In 2019, he wanted to go back, but he wanted to take a more treacherous route called the Northeast route, which made him have to enter through Tibet, if I'm not mistaken. And on his wrist, he was wearing a one-off prototype of the Vacheron Constantin Overseas Dual Time, right? And that was that actual watch that was made in titanium with that tantalum reinforcement for the bezel. That watch had a really cool look to it. It had a black dial that was matte, that had this really cool granular surface, and it had a big orange hand for the second time zone, and it had a big AM and PM indicator for the home time. He wanted to wear this watch in particular because he wanted to keep track of time at home in the United States and local time in Everest where he was climbing. Unfortunately, he had to turn back, but he wore that watch the entire time, he and his climbing partner, who I believe was called Esteban Mana. So eventually that watch made its way to the Phillips auction. It was auctioned in 2019 in the Game Changers auction and raised over 106,000 US dollars for the National Geographic Society, which, as we all can agree, is a very worthwhile cause. So for the rest of us watch buying public, we were like, dude, you got to launch that watch. It's such a cool looking watch. It's like one of the dopest Vacheron Constantin Overseas ever. When are you going to launch that watch? Well, the answer to that question is they are about to launch it now. So in September 22nd of 2021, you will now get this watch, which is the limited edition Vacheron Constantin Overseas Dual Time Everest edition, which is of course modeled after the one-off prototype that was worn by Cory Richards. This watch is super cool. It's a different material. It looks very similar, but instead of a titanium case, it's got a steel case. And instead of a bezel with a reinforcement in tantalum, it's got a titanium bezel. But otherwise, the watch looks essentially the same. Oh yes, instead of a Ventil cotton strap, which incidentally I'm not really sure what that means, but you've got a Cordura strap here, which Cordura I do know what it means because it's very sturdy and it's used in a lot of industrial applications. So this watch is incredible looking on the wrist. It's got that same granular matte black dial. It's got the big orange hand for the second time zone or the home time indicator, and then it's got the big AM and PM indicator as well. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever had an opportunity to play around with the Vacheron Constantin Overseas Dual Time, but I'm going to walk you through it right now. So if you look at it here, the home time and the local time hour hands are coupled together, right? And so you've got an indication for PM hours and AM hours at 9 o'clock. You've got an indication of the running seconds on the cannon pinion in the center with this big white hand. And then you've got the indication of the date. So one thing that you guys need to check out first of all is this. So you move the hands past the midnight threshold, you'll see this will jump to AM, and then the date will jump to the next day. A lot of times if you're flying from, let's say a GMT plus zone to a GMT minus zone, you'll have to go backwards. And what's great about that is in the local time indication, the date will actually follow it backwards as well. So if you look here, you'll see the date goes forward, and then it'll go backwards as well, right? So the date is always following local time, which is really cool. So now you can decouple the hands by bringing it out to position number 1. And now the orange hour hand is going to stay in place as you bring your local time hour hand to its new position. And as you can see, date followed that as well. So it's as simple as that. And if you want a manual correction for the date, then you just unscrew this and you press that pusher and the date will change. So let's see, we can do that right now. And there you go. Incredibly easy and intuitive to use. Great watch. It's going to be made in 150 pieces, limited edition, and I can only imagine they're going to sell out pretty fast. Very fast, actually. It's a great looking watch, and it's going to be joined by a chronograph version of the Overseas, which will also come in the same colorway. Thank you so much for joining me. Peace out, guys.